So one of the cool things about GitHub is that once you guys are logged into GitHub, you can clone or download this repository. And it's something to experiment with, because if you open in desktop, that is that's the GitHub desktop. And it's a really good system to have, because you can actually subscribe to a repository, and every time I make changes to that repository, you guys have the opportunity to sync with that repository. Now, with the thousands of lines of code within our own 311 repository, that means that it's very easy for me to make little shifts and changes, and there's not a lot of bugs per se, but what if I wanted to enrich it? What if I wanted to dump some new assets in there? That means that you would get those assets when you were to sync with that repository. And of course, I would let you know, hey, grab these new files up on GitHub. So even if you're using as simple a computer as a Microsoft Surface, I mean, a Surface isn't 100% viable laptop. You know, it's just super minimal in its encasing. Even if you have a Surface, you still be able to sync completely with GitHub. That's a big deal. Now, there's a couple of files up in our GitHub here in Unit 1 that I think I'd like you to look at. All of these introductory files, I think you should run them all. And I think, go look at sample 2. They're all little variants, but probably a student who's had a little bit of object-oriented programming is going to get these pretty fast. There's not a lot of PhD stuff here in these files. Here you go, load. And what I'd like for you to do is I'd like you to put them all up on your personal cloud, up in your S3. S3, by definition, provides a HTTP service. They are what you'd call a web server, but really they're services that are responsible for delivering HTTP and HTTPS. Therefore, anything that's in HTML is perfectly delivered through an HTTP or HTTPS service. So you have, in effect, the equivalent of an Apache or a light TDP web server, which some of you have been hacking around with. You deploy a Linux instance, you make a web server, all excellent, exercises. But I wanted to get you guys a quick way to host your website without a lot of Fandango, without a lot of Dipsy Doodle, that's secure, and it's also DDoS proof. So it'd be very hard to deny your sites. Also, it's not possible to hack your sites. And the way that Amazon makes websites available is frankly going to stand up against the intensive security scanning culture that we have here at Cal Poly, which is there are frankly hundreds of young people who are running Jack the Ripper on websites right now. There are hundreds of young people running Metasploit, and they're just looking for a nice little vulnerable website. So the last thing I want to do in the host of a massive hacker culture is produce a website that is 100% vulnerable. So the PHP, the Ruby on Rails, the JSP, the traditional ASP websites, they're like Swiss cheese in the hands of our students. So I need to put something past that's much more industrial grade. And frankly, this is CIA, this is NSA grade stuff. It's very tough to take apart an Amazon-hosted website. Now, there are other ways of hosting in Amazon. You could actually create a Linux instance. You could create a Windows instance. You could create a proper website using very traditional services. In AWS, that's done under EC2. And you can deploy servers as you are familiar with. That's wonderful, and I recommend that you try that. What we're doing here, though, is a little bit different in that there is a service already deployed that is running HTTPS. It's hard to scan it. It's hard to hack it. It's hard for the public to know how it works. So I want to be able to get that HTTP service without the vulnerable exploit, without the managerial overhead that's required from a traditional web server. So that's an interesting trade-off. Now, I will say this because you're Southern California and you guys have tremendous need to get your hands dirty, which I admire. Like you guys have tremendous, mechanic DNA. Frankly, getting things delivered easily may go against the grain. Getting something that is not delivered in a very granular way may not be of interest to you. But let me say this. I have other challenges for you. Getting bogged down in sysadmin doesn't get you extra brownie points if you can get it done a more secure, faster, more highly available way, which is what I'm trying to do. So the static serverless website that we're doing here is not done by the majority of sites, but it works better than the majority of sites. And it's just a matter of time before more sites go on board with the S3 hosting. It does mean that you need to make your pages in a certain way. The pages are simpler to code. There is less code needed. They are 6 times faster to run, and it is much easier to deploy. So it's all the perfect trade-offs are there with the S3 system. So I'm actually going to do a new talk this Thursday, but what I want to do is I want to introduce this next bit of content by saying the next steps for you are to acquire a Facebook developer account. So you're actually going to go to developers.facebook.com. Now, it does not surprise me that your generation has completely gone anti-Facebook. With the news coming out on Facebook last weekend, frankly, it should strike none of you as news that Facebook collects analytics and sells those analytics. That's what Facebook does. That should surprise nobody. Frankly, it's fake news. That's not news, but it's meant to go against the president and make him look bad, and that's the premise of media. So that's what that's about. What I was worried about is last weekend, because there's all this negative Facebook news and Zuckerberg needs to go back before Congress and all this other stuff, I was worried about deploying Facebook at the core of my 311 class. But frankly, we need Facebook. The majority of the world is on Facebook, and everybody seems to have a Facebook account. So as a web dev, you actually want to leverage the power of Facebook at minimum to deliver an authentication solution. And authentication is the beginnings of security, where a person has the ability to vouch for who they say they are. So Facebook, we're going to use that. You're going to go in there and you're going to use your Facebook login to get an account. And then you're going to be delivered to this page where there's tons of reference material for you guys to read. I mean, just because you don't have a textbook, you can still come in here and check out the Facebook docs regarding their API. We're going to use a lot of Facebook. The first thing you're going to do here is you're going to make what's called a new app. And I'll just go quick. The name is going to be Mira app. Sorry, Mira, now you're live. I'll delete that. I'll call it Joel's app. Good job. That's and I'll call this Spring 2018, just so I remember. And that will create an app ID. The app ID is really important. And remember, this is on YouTube, so don't hustle. I'm horrible at these. Great. Now, this is fairly daunting. I'm going to say that it is now on. And it will, but what I want to work on is my Facebook login. You can configure, you can make a messenger app. You can run analytics, right? You can create an Instagram app. You could run payments. Facebook still remains a very important node of internet discovery. A lot of people, especially new people who have new phones in the last couple of years, Facebook is an important on-ramp to the internet. And even though us cool kids up here in the ivory tower may think down about Facebook, well, guess what? All those kids who are like burning their neighborhoods down, they're doing it over Facebook. Does that make sense? Like, Facebook still remains an important medium for American culture, even though the cool kids are no longer on it. Does that make sense? So please, let's not be snobby about Facebook. It still remains an important thing. So let's set up the login. And we're going to use web. Now, the URL of our site is already available to you guys because you have made your new bucket. And let's go and let's say, where's my new bucket? Oh, my fault. I have a new bucket, and it should appear there in a minute. And so my sample starting bucket, you note that there is a URL for this bucket. Let's go in there. Let's say that this page, sample 1, that is the URL to the page that I want to make Facebook aware of. Now, what you get with Facebook is you get one page where there is a Facebook login button. And that is the official login button. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab that button here. We're going to copy that link. And we're going to provide that back to Joel's app. Save. Great. And then we'll continue. Now, really, the Facebook app really only needs that URL to function. And now you have the app ID right there. That's a critical piece that you need. Now, it's really just that simple. But what's interesting is it's easy to get your Facebook app ID once you have your S3 established. So right now, you've built up two very important things. One, you have your HTTP service, right? You are on the web. Now you have Facebook. And the purpose for Facebook is that you have open authentication, or OAuth. So people can use their Facebook username and password to log in and register with your website, which provides what's called an OAuth token that will be passed between Facebook and Amazon Web Services. So that's a professional tool that you now have. And you guys, you're not going to struggle with this. This is easy. So what the next move is, and I'm going to repeat this a number of times, is I'm going to go back to my Amazon, and I'm going to go to my third building block, which is called Identity and Access Management, or IAM. Now, what I need to know about, in order to make IAM work, there's really two pieces of IAM that matters. One is roles, and the other is policies. And what you guys are learning right now is what's called role-based access control, or RBAC. Now, if you ever become a CISP, or a Certified Internet Security Expert, RBAC is an important part of that exam. And what's cool about RBAC is you're going to do RBAC right now, and it's not a big deal. What we do is we configure a role, and the person who inherits that role will inherit all the privileges with coming with that role. So right now, you guys are Cal Poly students. You have an ID. If you swipe the ID, you might get access to certain things. Does that make sense? By having that ID, you get privileges here on campus. Now, if I had not been registered, I hadn't been accepted, well, I don't get that card and I don't get other privileges. So you guys all have a student role here at the university. That's a big deal. So we do similar things here. So what we're going to do is we're going to configure a role, and we'll go more into this. I have like 2 or 3 minutes left of class but I'm going to create a role here, and I'm going to do it using a web identity. And my identity provider, you have to scroll down here a little bit, it's going to be Facebook, and it's going to say, well, what app on Facebook do you have? And of course I have that right here, and I'm going to copy that. Right, that's my app ID. That's like golden. And I'm going to put that in there. So right now you have this handshake. I almost said your name on YouTube. Almost. Thank you for putting that up. Right now there's a handshake that you guys are creating between your Amazon account, where you have a URL that's public, and Facebook, where you have an app that knows about that URL. So you're creating this handshake between these two clouds, right? And now your Amazon knows about that app on Facebook, and your Facebook knows about your website over on Amazon. That's pretty studly, and you should come back home to Grandma and be like, hey, Grandma, I just knitted two clouds together today. And that's accurate. Like, you're not BSing. That's what you're doing. So let's set up the permissions next. Now, by setting up that app ID, that means that every time a person logs in through Facebook inside of your website, as long as they're associated with that app ID, they get the role that you're creating. And I may have explained that wrong, but as long as your users are using Facebook, they're going to get access to the things that you deem necessary to them, which is an important step in security. So what you're doing here and I may create a policy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the JSON for it. And I'm going to move a little bit fast right here, and I'm going to slow it down in a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this policy right here. And if you guys download this file, the same thing will be available for you. I'm going to download, I'm going to create this policy. And what this is doing is it's creating some freedoms. It's saying you can put stuff and you can change the security on stuff in S3 based on that resource. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the name of my bucket right in there. And I'm going to change it in a minute. And that gives me a bunch of other liberties, much of which you're going to use in this course. And we're going to go back and explain this a bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go the Joel app S3 policy. It allows coders to apply authorization to upload photos to our S3 bucket. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say spring 2018 so that I can find that policy later. That's such an ugly name. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that policy. Now what I can do is I can create like 100 different policies, and I could bundle them all within that role. So let's say one of you logged in and got that role, you would get access to those 100 policies, which is kind of cool. So we're going to pursue this as we get in there Thursday. I see some people outside the door. I'm going to create that policy. But I just want to set that in motion, the kind of HTTP, the authentication via Facebook, the authorization on Amazon, and then the JavaScript that's inside of your hosted bucket. These are things that are going to keep repeating themselves. We're going to use these every day when we come back, right? A week from now, you won't even be thinking about this. But I want to set those seeds. So, good job. I'll see you next video.